Nobody in this neighborhood had ever seen a car like that parked on this street. Black, gleaming, the kind of car that belonged to an entirely different class of people. The woman who stepped out didn't look around. She walked straight to the door of the smallest house on the block, the one with the cracked porch step that nobody had fixed for 2 years. And she knocked. Not the way people knock when they're unsure. The way people knock when they've been thinking about this exact door for a very long time. Marcus Holt opened it, and something crossed his face that wasn't surprise. It was recognition. The quiet, devastating kind. The kind that only comes when the person standing at your door is someone you once chose to lose. She spoke before he could. "I've waited long enough." He stepped aside. Let her in. And for the first time in 20 years, the door between them closed. From the inside. Friday, 6:45 in the morning. The garbage disposal at the Calloway house had been making a particular sound since Tuesday. The low grinding complaint of something working its way into the mechanism. Marcus had been expecting the call. He fixed it in 11 minutes, extracted a piece of bone from the grinder, tested the unit twice. Mrs. Calloway offered $20. He took her banana bread instead, wrapped it in a paper towel, and didn't explain that it was one of 4 things Lily would eat on a school morning without negotiation. He drove to the pharmacy the long way, sat in the parking lot for 4 minutes before going in. Read the results in the truck with the engine off, unfolded the paper, read what it said, folded it back along the same crease he'd made last month. The numbers hadn't moved in any direction that constituted good news. He put the paper in his shirt pocket, started the engine, and drove home. Lily was on the kitchen counter when he walked in, legs swinging, watching the oven with the focused suspicion she reserved for appliances she didn't fully trust. "Bah, timer. I know. The chicken thing. I know what it is." She looked at him then, the specific look she'd been giving him for 3 months, patient, cataloging, the look of someone memorizing something before it changes. He opened the refrigerator and stood in the cold air a moment longer than necessary before reaching for anything. They ate. 2 chairs, 4 dishes. Lily talked. He listened. That was the shape of dinner, had been for 2 years, and neither of them needed to name it. After she slept, he was still awake at 1 in the morning. The kitchen was spotless, had been for months. Not the spotless of a naturally clean person, but the spotless of someone who runs out of things to do and starts again from the beginning. He'd already wiped the counters once. He did it again. Stood at the sink and washed a mug that was already clean, dried it, placed it back on the shelf with the handle facing exactly right. Then stood there with the dish towel in his hands, looking at nothing in particular through the window above the faucet. The neighborhood was quiet, the kind of quiet that has texture. A dog somewhere, a car on the distant road, the refrigerator cycling on and off. He stood in it until his feet started to ache from the cold floor, and then he stood a little longer. On the nightstand, the brown leather folder, edges soft from 2 years of handling. He didn't open it that night. He sat on the edge of the bed and set his hand flat on the cover, not reading, just confirming, then turned off the lamp. 3 months ago, he had called Dr. Price. One request: if a woman named Diana Marsh ever called the practice or came to the house, tell her the truth, the full timeline, the prognosis. Don't soften the numbers, don't add context, don't make it easier to receive than it actually was. Price had asked why he didn't tell her himself. Marcus had said he wasn't sure he could get through it without losing the thread of what mattered, which was her understanding it fully, not forgiving him or feeling anything in particular toward him, just understanding the whole shape of it, from the outside, where the shape was actually visible. Price had agreed. He was a good doctor partly because he understood that some information travels differently, depending on who carries it. Marcus lay in the dark and listened to the house breathe. The next morning, he opened the door without looking through the peephole. She was taller than he remembered, or maybe it was the heels. Or maybe 2 decades of becoming Diana Marsh had restructured something in the way she held herself, a specific alignment that hadn't been there at 23, when she was just Diana, sitting across from him at a restaurant he'd chosen because it cost enough to imply something he hadn't yet found words for. She was already speaking when the door opened. "I've come to collect a debt you owe me for 20 years. No preamble. No hello. 20 years of preparation delivered in 14 words on a cracked porch step on a Friday morning. Marcus said nothing. There was a specific kind of conversation that broke if you started it wrong, and he had learned, the long way and the hard way, to recognize the first sentence. Lily appeared around his elbow. She looked at Diana the way she looked at everything she found genuinely interesting. Completely, without embarrassment, head at a precise tilt. "You have a really nice car," she said. Something shifted in Diana, barely visible, a fraction of a degree in the line of her shoulders. "Thank you," she said. "Is it yours, or did someone lend it to you?" "Lily." Marcus put one hand on her shoulder. "I'm just asking." "Breakfast." She went. Not far, he could hear her socks on the kitchen floor, the deliberate, unhurried sound of someone relocating rather than leaving. Marcus stepped back from the door. Diana walked in. She didn't sit. She stood in the middle of the kitchen and took it in. The clean counters, the stacked dishes with their rims aligned, the half-open bedroom door at the end of the hall. She stood with her arms at her sides and her chin level. Composure, or something that had spent 2 decades becoming indistinguishable from it. Marcus poured a second cup of coffee and set it on the table. He didn't push it toward her or suggest she'd take it. He leaned against the far counter, crossed his arms, and waited with the patience of someone who has already had this conversation, many times, alone. "You know why I'm here," she said. "I know why you think you're here." One beat. "Excuse me?" "You've had 20 years to find me." He didn't move from the counter. "You looked me up 3 months ago. Something changed." He looked at her steadily. "You didn't come to deliver a speech. You came because there's a question you can't answer on your own." She reached into her bag and set a USB drive on the table. Placed it the way you place evidence at a hearing, not the way you hand someone a gift. 15 years, she said. Your movements, your business history, the money trail from the original investment offer. Every company you've been associated with since. She looked at him. "I want to hear your version before I decide what to do with mine." Marcus looked at the USB drive on the table for a long moment. Then he went to the bedroom and came back with the brown leather folder. He set it beside the drive without explanation, her 15 years and his 2 years, side by side on the same surface, in the same kitchen. He pulled out a chair, sat down across from her, waited. She looked at the folder, then at him. "What is that?" "Sit down, Diana." A long beat. She sat. Lily appeared in the doorway carrying an empty cereal bowl she was clearly not there to wash. She looked at Diana with those steady, cataloging eyes. "Did you know my dad from before?" she asked. "Before he got sick?" The air rearranged itself. Diana looked at the child, then at Marcus. "She knows?" Diana asked. "She knows what's hers to know." Lily set the bowl on the counter. "He looks different in the old pictures," she said. "More hair." A sideways glance at Marcus. "Sorry, Ba. Noted. I'm just saying." She disappeared around the corner, and somehow the kitchen felt warmer for having briefly had her in it, and quieter now that she was gone. Diana looked at the empty doorway. Her hands, which had been flat on the table, shifted, one over the other, then back again. A small, Unplanned movement. Marcus opened the folder and began to talk. Not a prepared speech. The uneven, halting account of someone who has rehearsed something so many times that the rehearsal finally burns away, and what comes out is just the actual thing. Stripped, unvarnished, without the careful architecture of the versions he'd practiced alone. He told her about Gerald Whitmore, senior partner. 40 years of built credibility, the kind that opens doors younger men spend careers trying to locate. He told her about being 25 and certain he understood more than he did, about the investment offer that seemed legitimate because it had been constructed to seem so, presented through every legitimate channel by a man who had spent 4 decades building those channels specifically to be used this way. He told her about the afternoon Whitmore first mentioned her father's name, not as an accusation, never directly, just placed into a conversation, like a stone set in a path, leading a grieving and furious young man to a conclusion someone needed him to reach. He told her he had come to that restaurant with a plan. He told her the plan had not survived the second meeting. Diana sat very still. She looked at her hands on the table with the focused attention of someone using a fixed point to stay inside a difficult thing. "You left before the collapse," she said when he stopped. "You were already gone." "Yes." "Why not go to someone? Regulators, an attorney, anyone." Whitmore had built it carefully. He was quiet for a moment. My word against 40 years of his. And by the time I fully understood what I'd been part of, I had also spent 3 months sitting across from you under false pretenses. He looked at the table. I couldn't surface one without surfacing the other. And I couldn't. He stopped, set his hand on the back of a chair without pulling it out. I couldn't make that part visible. The kitchen held the silence. Outside, a screen door banged twice in the wind. "So you disappeared," she said. "Yes. That's not the same as being innocent." "No," he said. "It isn't." She took the folder home, didn't open it until after midnight, still in her blazer at her kitchen table, the folder spread flat in the lamplight. She went through it the way she went through every document that mattered. First pass for structure, second pass for detail, third pass for what didn't add up. The wire transfer confirmation was 40 pages in. Stratton Capital Partners. $2,400,000 routed through 3 intermediate accounts before landing in a fund quietly dissolved 8 months after the bankruptcy. The signatory was Gerald Whitmore, not her father, not Marcus. A 63-year-old man with 40 years of professional credibility and a retirement property in coastal Maine, who had been by every public account a respected figure in his field. She read that page 6 times. The math wasn't complicated once you had the right numbers. Whitmore had built the collapse from the inside, using a 25-year-old junior associate as the public face of the offer. Junior enough to be disposable when it came apart, credible enough to be believed while it was being constructed. By the time the lawsuit started, Whitmore had already moved his assets. By the time anyone asked the right questions, there was no one left to ask them of. She kept reading. 31 documents mentioned Whitmore, each cross-referenced against public bankruptcy filings. 2 years of methodical, unhurried work, compiled by a man who was also, during those same 2 years, driving to a pharmacy once a month and reading numbers that didn't improve, and raising a child alone in a house he cleaned at 1 a.m, because there was nothing else left to do with his hands. At the very back of the folder, 1 page, torn from a lined notebook. Ink faded at the margins. She'd almost missed it on the first pass. I didn't leave because I stopped. I left because I started. She set it down. She had held herself together through the bankruptcy hearings at 23, sitting beside a father who had stopped being able to fill the space of himself, who seemed to be slowly stepping back from the outline of his own body. She had held herself together through his funeral, through the apartment she couldn't afford, and the folding table she used as a desk for the first 2 years of building Marsh Capital. Through every version of impressive, for her age, delivered by men who meant something very specific by the phrase. Through 7 years of being the youngest person in every room, and the one working hardest, and the one who could least afford to let that show. She had held herself together through all of it. Her face was wet before she knew she was crying. She sat at the kitchen table in the lamplight and did not hold herself together. Not for long, but long enough for something that had been held at a particular tension for a very long time to release. Slightly, quietly, the way things do when they are finally allowed to. She straightened, wiped her face, closed the folder along its worn crease. Dr. Price called at 8 the next morning. "Ms. Marsh, Marcus Holt asked me to contact you if you came by. He thought you would." She waited. "He has 3 to 4 months, known since January. He chose not to pursue aggressive treatment. The odds didn't justify the cost in time remaining." A pause. "The folder took 2 years. He didn't know if you'd ever come. He prepared it regardless." "The girl," Diana said, "has no one else." "He didn't ask me to tell you that. He said it once, in a different context, and I thought you should have it." The call ended. Diana set the phone face down on the table. Through the window, the morning was doing what mornings do, moving forward without comment, entirely unconcerned. She watched it for a long time without seeing it. Then she picked up her keys. She was back the next morning at 7:15. No blazer, gray sweater, flat shoes, the folder tucked under one arm. Lily opened the door before Diana knocked, looked at the sweater, the shoes, processed the difference from yesterday. "You look different." Good different or bad different. Genuine consideration. A tilt of the head. "Just different." She stepped back. "Ba's making eggs. He makes them the same every time, but the toast is actually really good." The kitchen smelled like coffee and bread, and the particular warmth of a room lived in since before sunrise. Marcus was at the stove with his back to the room. He didn't turn around when Diana came in. "Coffee's on the counter." She poured a cup. Set the folder on the table. Not placed this time, just set down. The way you set something in a space that is beginning to know your weight. Lily climbed onto her stool and pulled her drawing pad toward her. Selected a navy marker with the decisive focus of someone who has been planning this specific action since yesterday. Uncapped it. Began. 3 plates on the table. Scrambled eggs without asking. They ate, the 3 of them, with the morning coming through the window, and Lily drawing with one hand, and nobody requiring the silence to mean anything in particular. The kitchen held it all without effort. Lily slid the drawing across the table without looking up. A navy house. 3 figures out front. Tall, medium, small. The smallest one had what might have been a cape, or possibly very ambitious shoulders. Below them, in Lily's careful printing, "For the lady." Diana looked at it. Marcus was looking at his eggs. He didn't say anything. He didn't look up. "Thank you," Diana said. "You can keep it," Lily said. "I used navy because you said navy blue. I remembered." "I know you did." Lily took a drink of orange juice, set it down, looked at Marcus. "Ba forgets things sometimes," she said conversationally. "I don't." "That's debatable," Marcus said without looking up. "Name one thing." "The permission slip, 3 weeks in a row." "That was on purpose." "Still counts." Diana looked between them. Something moved in her face. Not visibly. More like a change in pressure, in the quality of her attention. She looked back at the drawing and set both hands flat on the table beside it. Marcus reached across and refilled her coffee without asking. When he set the pot back, his hand stayed on the handle a beat too long. He was looking at the folder. "I read the note," she said. He sat back down. She looked at him directly. "Whitmore is reachable. I have the address. I have attorneys in Boston and New York who specialize in financial fraud and won't be deterred by a retirement property in Maine or 40 years of reputation. She held his eyes. I'm not doing this for you. I'm doing it because it's the right ending to a story that got away from everyone who was in it. Okay, he said. That's all? You've already decided. He folded his hands on the table. You didn't come back this morning to ask my opinion. She was quiet. Lily had stopped drawing. She was looking at her orange juice with great concentration, which meant she was listening to everything. There's something else, Diana said. He waited. I don't know how to be what she needs. She said it evenly. Not an apology, not a confession, just the clean delivery of someone who has looked at a thing squarely before choosing to speak it. I've spent 20 years being very good at things I can measure. Returns, risk. I'm not sure I'm built for things that can't be calculated. She looked at the drawing. But I keep coming back here. I drive away and I turn around. I don't know exactly what that means, but I think it might be the only qualification I actually have. The kitchen was very quiet. Lily reached over, without looking up from her pad, and straightened Diana's coffee cup, which had settled at a slight angle on its saucer. There, she said. That evening, after Diana left, Marcus stood at the sink. The dishes were done. The kitchen was clean. There was nothing left to wipe, nothing to reorganize, nothing that needed his hands. He sat down at the kitchen table. He had held himself together through the diagnosis, sitting in Price's office and listening to numbers the way you listen to bad weather forecasts, looking for something actionable in them. He had held himself together through Sabrina's departure, through the school meetings, through the mornings he made 4 dishes for 2 people, because 3 seemed wrong and 1 was unthinkable. He had held himself together through every night he set the paper towel note on the refrigerator, bus money, left drawer, because it was the one concrete guarantee he could make before the day started asking for more. He had held himself together through all of it. He opened the folder, turned to the last page, the handwritten note. He hadn't looked at it in months, not because he'd forgotten what it said, but because he'd known exactly what it said for 2 years, had written it at 2 in the morning when the house was clean for the 3rd time, and there was nothing left to do except sit with what was true. I didn't leave because I stopped. I left because I started. He set his hand flat on the page. The refrigerator hummed. A car passed outside. Then quiet again. He had held himself together through January, and the numbers, and the decision not to pursue treatment. He had held himself together through the morning he sat Lily down and told her, in the most honest words available to him for an 8-year-old, what was happening and what it meant. He had held himself together through her face when she understood, which was the hardest thing, and through her face 10 minutes later, when she'd asked if she could still go to Madison's birthday party on Saturday, which was somehow harder. He sat at the kitchen table and looked at his own handwriting. He did not hold himself together. It wasn't dramatic. He didn't make a sound. He just sat in the quiet kitchen with the folder open and his hand flat on the page, and something that had been held at pressure for a very long time let go. Slowly, without announcement, the way things let go when they are finally allowed to. He sat there for a while. When he finally stood, the streetlight had come on outside. He picked up his phone and called Diana. She answered on the 2nd ring. I want to ask you something, he said, and I want you to answer honestly. Okay. Why did you come back this morning? Silence. Not the silence of someone who doesn't know. The silence of someone deciding how much of the real answer to give. Because of the note, she said. And because of Lily. A pause. And because I haven't known anyone in 20 years who knew me before I became this. I didn't realize how much that mattered until I was standing in your kitchen. He said nothing. That's more than you asked for, she said. No, That's exactly what I asked for. A quiet moment on the line. Marcus. Yeah. I'm still angry. I want you to know that. I haven't decided yet what it means, but I'm still angry. I know. Okay, a pause. How's Lily? Asleep. She drew you a second picture tonight. She says it needs more work. She's not ready to give it to you yet. But she drew it. Diana was quiet for a moment. What color? Navy, mostly. Yellow for the windows. Neither of them said anything for a moment. Outside his window, the street was still and empty. I'll see you tomorrow, she said. 7:15, he said. She arrived at 7:12, 3 minutes early. She stood on the porch for a moment before knocking. Something she hadn't done before, had always knocked immediately or been met by Lily first. This time she stood on the cracked bottom step and looked at the door. Then she knocked. Lily opened it, looked at Diana, looked behind her at the empty porch, as if checking for something she'd expected to find. You came back, Lily said. I said I would. Lily held this for a moment, the specific weight of said versus done, a calculation she'd been running quietly for a while now. Then she stepped back from the door. But made the good toast today, she said. The kind with the butter before. The kitchen was warm. Marcus was at the stove. He turned around this time when Diana came in, looked at her briefly, said nothing, turned back to the eggs. Diana sat down at the table. The brown leather folder was on the counter behind her. She'd set it there yesterday without thinking, and it had stayed. It looked different from there, less like evidence, more like something that lived in the room. Lily came from her bedroom carrying a drawing held against her chest, face inward. She stood at the edge of the kitchen for a moment. Then she walked to Diana and held it out. The Navy house again, but with yellow windows this time. Light coming from inside. And the three figures were no longer standing out front. They were in the doorway, together, in the opening, with the light behind them. Below them, in Lily's careful printing. Home. Diana looked at it. She looked at the yellow windows, at the three figures standing in the open door, at the single word underneath. She set the drawing on the table and pressed it flat with both hands. The way you press something you want to stay. Marcus set a plate in front of her. Eggs and toast, the kind with the butter before. Then he pulled out a chair. Not across from her, beside her. He had not sat beside anyone at this table in 2 years. Lily knew this. She'd watched him do it, and she didn't say a word about it. She just picked up her fork and looked between them both, and then looked back at her eggs. Bah, she said. Can I ask Diana something? Sure, Diana said. Lily looked at her directly. Not will you. The careful conditional of adults navigating uncertainty. Not would you. Just. Are you going to keep coming back? Diana looked at the drawing, at the yellow windows, at the word underneath. Yes, she said. Lily nodded. The nod she gave to things she had worked out and now simply needed confirmed. She put a piece of toast in her mouth, chewed, swallowed. She said yes, she told Marcus. I heard her. I'm just saying. Marcus looked at the drawing on the table, then at Diana. She was looking at the folder on the counter, not with the weight it had carried for 3 days. Something quieter. The way you look at something you've been carrying for a long time and have finally set in a place it can stay. Lily reached over and set a blank page and the navy marker in front of Diana. Will you draw something? She asked. I want to see what you draw. Diana looked at the marker, then at the blank page. She took it, held it over the paper for a moment, not hesitating. Something else. The pause before writing something you've been thinking about for a long time. She drew a door. Just that. A door, slightly open. Light coming through the crack. Lily studied it, tilted her head. What is that? Diana set the marker down. A beginning, she said. Lily looked at it for another moment. Then she nodded. Slow. Certain. The nod she reserved for things that had settled into place, and went back to her own drawing. The kitchen held all three of them. The morning kept going. None of them looked up to watch it pass.